The Pennsylvania State Climate Office is housed within the Penn State Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science, and every so often we like to sit down and talk with the Pennsylvania State Climatologist himself, Kyle Imhoff. And Kyle joins us on the show tonight. Welcome back to Weather World, Kyle. And of course, it's been a while since we chatted. We last talked to you in the studio. We've been impacted, of course, by COVID-19. How are you doing, and how's the Climate Office been impacted?
Yeah, well, thankfully, me and my family are doing well, as good as you can do when you're stuck at home and working remotely. But in terms of climate office operations, we've actually been able to maintain operations relatively smoothly. We're able to access all of our databases and data streams. I can do all that from home, as well as our colleagues that help us out on our research projects. So we're able to keep things going and keeping the ball rolling down the hill. It just can be a little bit more sluggish at times if you have network outages or things like that we're all dealing with in this virtual environment. But otherwise, things are going relatively well.
Have you found any similarities to your workflow now versus before? I'm guessing you meet with state climatologists virtually before.
Yeah, we actually did do a lot of webinars and conference calls and things. In fact, I just last week had a virtual meeting with a few of our Mid-Atlantic partners, the Delaware and New Jersey and New York state climate offices and state climatologists. So yeah, we do regularly do those sort of things. So it hasn't changed the workflow from that perspective. That's true.
We always like to get an update as to some of the ongoing projects within the Climate Office. Take us through some of those.
Yeah, so obviously we've spoken before about the Mesonet projects that we're continuing to work on. So that's been a lot of the work that we've done recently. We're also in partnering with our students. Actually, we have been working on a station inventory project where we're developing a list of the highest quality climate stations across the state, so that can access those in a more easy to understand and visually appealing manner. So we've been working on that for the past several months over the course of the spring semester this year. We'll also be starting to work on over the next few months the new climate normals that will come out later this year, early next year. So that'll be one of the things that we'll be working with our students on there as well. And some other things that might be coming down the pike. I think it would be interesting to actually potentially utilize climate information to work on some public health or even COVID related questions. So that may be something that we can provide some research or we're taking some research that has to do with the public health sector as well.
I wanted to go back to what you touched on with the Keystone Mesonet. Has the pandemic impacted some of the installation of those Mesonet sites?
Yeah, so it actually has. We've been slowed down quite a bit, as you could expect, without being able to go out for a period of time, even to visit the sites, the existing sites, but also to install new sites as well. So we have been slowed down there. There's been other slowdowns not related to COVID, actually, in terms of leasing agreements and property rights and things, since you have to install these units on concrete pads. So there's a lot of legal work that has to be done in order to get all these sites in place and actually be able to go out and install the units. So there's been a lot of hiccups along the way, which we anticipated, but certainly COVID hasn't helped that at all.
And going back to another thing that you said earlier, Kyle, you mentioned the new normals. What does that mean for Pennsylvanians?
Yeah, so every 10 years we come up with a new climate normal base. So that is it's a reference value. These normals are reference values that compare where you're at on any given day, what current conditions are, and how that compares to what we call these normal values. And really they're long-term averages. They're using statistics for long periods of time to try to decipher what typically occurs in a given location, whether it's in the state of Pennsylvania or anywhere across the country. So every 10 years, those are calculated for the most recent 30-year period. So the ones that we use right now are the 1981 to 2010 normals, and then we'll be rolling out the 1991 to 2020 normals. And like I said, that'll be coming out early next year. And the National Centers for Environmental Information, they're the national federal umbrella organization that computes these normals for everyone across the country. And so we'll be utilizing that information to develop new products for our website and have that available to anyone that wants to take a look at those numbers.
Talked about a lot of exciting things happening. Another exciting thing, we've actually had a few features on this on the show in the past are Pennsylvania extremes. And there's actually a Pennsylvania Extremes Committee. Can you tell us what they are and exactly when you meet, what those extremes are?
Right. So the official title of them are State Climate Extremes Committee. So Pennsylvania being one of the states in the union, we do have an extremes committee that meets. We don't have a regular meeting date, so it's not something where you have a regular period every year or every other year you meet. It's actually only comes up when you think that a climate record has been broken. So there are specific variables that we actually compute or we look for extremes, high and low temperatures, extreme precipitation events, whether they're 24-hour rainfall events or over a course of a month, maybe we look at rainfall and snowfall. So there are very specific variables that we look for extremes. And so the committee gets together. There's 4 or 5 of us that are professional scientists. Part of that is National Weather Service personnel. Obviously, the state climatologist is involved. There's other federal and regional colleagues that join us on these conferences or webinars, and we sit there and basically look at what the numbers look like, whether this specific record that if we think a record has been broken, we determine whether that observation actually looks reasonable, whether it was accurate, and then that could potentially break an existing record.
Mm-hmm. We're almost out of time, Kyle, but I wanted to get to one other quick question. After such a wet stretch for much of PA there, things really dried out quickly as we went into July before we did have some recent relief. But it got me thinking, according to some of the records and the data that you deal with, what was the worst stretch of drought that this state has ever seen?
Yeah, so the drought is an interesting one. We obviously think of lack of precipitation being the most important part, but there are short-term and long-term droughts, so sometimes you have to look at precipitation over very, very long periods of time. But generally speaking, when you think about drought in Pennsylvania, one of the ones that's most referenced, one of the events that's most referenced is the period in the early to mid-60s. So our driest 5-year period within the state was actually 1961 through 1966. So that was a very, very dry time, and not just in Pennsylvania. That was across much of the northeastern United States. So really, that is one of the main drought events that we've seen at least over the past several decades. That is notable across the state of Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. Well, Kyle, we are out of time. We could talk to you all night, and we will do so again. We'll make sure to have you back on the show and give us some updates on how things are going. In the meantime, stay healthy, you and your family, and we will be back in just a moment with more.